Manager at COREangels. Very happy to welcome you to another episode of Angel Talks, our monthly webinar series created for you, our amazing community of angel investors. Today's session is a little bit different and very special. We are not just talking about startups and investing, we are talking about leadership, a topic that is very close to all of us. And we want to specifically understand how we can help founders of our startups build companies that not just survive, but really thrive. We all know, especially that capital and financial support is just one part of the equation. Behind every great startup founder, behind every great startup is a founder who's managing all these complexities, the pressure, scaling, team dynamics, and somehow needs to hold it all together. So today we have some of you angel investors, some startup founders and fund managers with us. We are going beyond the spreadsheets and pitch decks. We are exploring how leadership can make a real difference in a company's growth and resilience. To help us today, we have invited someone extraordinary, Nash Billimoria, founder of Remap. He has worked with over 300 founders and leaders to help them reduce bottlenecks, empower their teams, and lead with clarity and purpose. We will hear more from him in just a second. Before we actually start, I would like you to take a look at our next two events. The first one is online, just like this one. It's next Monday, same time as today. We will take a look at a pitch. We will attend a pitch session from one of the startups of COREangels Barcelona. The startup is going to be in the next deal open on our syndicate platform. So head over to coreangels.com/coreangels events and register if you're interested to just check it out. And the deal will go live after the session and you'll be able to invest. Also on June 5th, during the South Summit in Madrid, we have organized another COREangels Day, our usual global networking day, where we all come together from different parts of the world, from 13 different funds. This time we have invited, as always, some VCs and family offices. Some of you on the call are attending. We just extended the early bird tickets. So I will share the code with you. We will have 40% of the ticket. Feel free to join us. Thank you. Nash, please. Welcome. You're mute.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Ella. Ella's done a great effort to make this session happen. It was supposed to happen some months ago. Then I had some personal situations. I had to cancel at the very last minute. She made me feel very at ease about canceling. I hope that was all right for everybody. She's rescheduled it, so I appreciate that. And also, I've got to give thanks to Urs. It's because of him that I'm here today and that he's the one who introduced me to Ella and to all of you. So thank you, Urs. And especially thank you to the founders and the investors, all of you that are on this call. I know you guys are busy. I know you have projects, teams to run, money to raise, things to sort out. And I know that 90 minutes of your time is a big ask. So I hope to make this session as relevant, engaging, and enjoyable as possible. So it's really good to be here. Really, really good to be here. So my name is Nash Billimoria. I'm the founder of a company called Remap. Remap is a leadership advisory and training organization, specially designed for scale-ups and SMEs to help them to build joyful, impactful, and high-performance organizations. You can feel free to ask more about that. I can tell you more about that later. So I wanted to frame the topic of today with a little bit of a question or reflection for you. Okay, So I want you to do this little exercise in visualization with me. I'm going to ask you a question and I want you to just go there with me. So I want you to think about a time where you were really operating at your best, where you were achieving work in an effortless way. Maybe you hardly noticed the time go by. You felt at ease. You were highly productive. There was no tension, no friction, and you were doing wonderful work. You maybe would describe that you were in the flow. Now I want you to imagine, what would it be like if you could help your team and your team members to step more into that state of operating? What would be the impact for you as a founder? What would be the impact for you as a business? How would that support you and help you? And so that's what today's session is really all about. It's about scalable leadership. How do we build companies that thrive and not just survive? So I'm just going to share my screen with you because I've got some slides that are prepared for the session. So just bear with me for a moment. And if somebody can give me a thumbs up that they can see this, that would be super helpful. Great,
Yeah, we
thank you,
see that.
Prissy. Just give me one little moment. Great. So today's going to be an interactive session. It's going to be more like a workshop style. So prepare to just get involved and get involved and engage with the topic. Before I jump into that, I should have done it at the start. I wanted to introduce you to Priti. She's my wife. She's also the co-founder of Remap. She has a wealth of experience. She's an economist, a program manager. She has a background in finance and a lot of other things. She's been a key part of the journey in Remap. She's here today. So I'll let her just say a quick hello.
Yeah, hi guys. I'm just going to be here in the background helping manage the breakouts and monitoring any questions. So do feel free as we're going through to pop questions in the chat if they occur to you, so we can either address them at the beginning, or at least get to them towards the end. So nice to meet you all.
Welcome, Priti. So why don't we start with a quick round of participant intros? It would be lovely to hear, where are you joining from? And are you a founder? Are you an investor? Or have you been on both sides of the equation? We'd love to hear from you. So just pop it in the chat. Where are you joining from, founder or investor, or if you've been on both sides of that? Love to hear.
Everyone's feeling shy. So.
I can start.
Well, you could just pop it in the chat. You don't have to say it out loud. You're welcome to if you like, but you could just pop it in the chat as well. But please go ahead. Whoever said I can start, we'd love to hear from you too.
Yes. Hello, Nash. Hello, Pretty. I'm Cynthia Mano. I'm joining from Lisbon.
Hi, Cynthia.
I've been a founder and investor, so in both sides.
Lovely. Excellent. It's great to have you. So maybe some people are on the train and so on. So it says Nuno is a startup founder from Lisbon, Madrid. Eugenia is from Madrid. She's an investor. Excellent. It's so nice to see people from both sides of that in the same call at the same time, having a conversation together. I think so often we separate the communities, and I just love the way that you guys are bringing this together. So that's awesome. So let's jump in, right? So as you can see, the title of the session is Scalable Leadership. So if you just humor me for just a few moments, I wanted to tell you a tiny bit of a backstory about what I observed through the last 20 to 24 years of my career and what scalable leadership is all about. So I spent the first roughly 10 years of my career working for investment banks in the city of London, Credit Suisse, Barcap, and other companies like that. And mostly I was working in change management. And then I did a massive pivot. I moved country. I left the UK. I moved to Spain, started a family, started a new business. It wasn't wise. At least it was very messy. But basically, for the 12 years after that, I've been working, as Ella said, with 250, 300 founders, leadership teams, helping them in the scaling up process. And there's something that I have observed that's common to both worlds that I wanted to share with you. And the pattern that I observed is that in both of those environments, there was a very strong and heavy emphasis on growth and an inadequate focus on scalability. And I think a lot of the times, especially I was definitely guilty of this, I would use the words growth and scalability as if they meant the same thing. I would use them interchangeably until I really realized that actually growth and scalability are really not the same thing. So growth is measured by external ingredients and factors. Things like how much revenue you make, how many employees you have, how much investment you raise, your valuation, how many channels you have, how many customers, widgets, whatever. It could be so many external indicators that are measures of growth, whereas scalability is measured by internal factors. It's measured by the effectiveness, the productivity, the well-being of an organization. I think a great analogy to illustrate this is if you take a photograph, a picture, and you stretch that picture, you could say that it has grown. But if it becomes grainy and pixelated, can you really say that it's scaled? It hasn't scaled if it's grainy and pixelated, right? To scale a picture means to grow the picture, but to maintain its quality. So if the picture is as clear when it's large as it was when it was small, then you could say that it's scaled. So essentially, scalability is about doing more with less, whereas growth is just about doing more. And so that's really fundamentally what gave rise to scalable leadership. Scalable leadership, oh, and I have a slide about it. Growth is about doing more, scale is about doing more with less. And so scalable leadership is, scalable leadership is essentially about how do I achieve more with less? How do I achieve more results with less input? And that's what this session is really all about. So I wanted to kind of frame a little bit the challenge for you as to what are some of the things that you may have observed either in your current existing organization or in other ones that might be present when there is a lack of focus on scalability. And some of those things are a lot of times is overwhelm from the founder or the leaders because they've taken on so much and essentially they become bottlenecks in their organization. A bottleneck is a narrowing down where many things have to pass through a very narrow passageway. And what that means is that it slows down traction, results, decisions, and everything gets slowed down. The other thing that is often present in an organization that doesn't have adequate scalability is dependency. So founders and leaders often find themselves asking or answering, should I say, the same set of questions over and over again. People are dependent upon them to be able to drive for solutions and achieve important outcomes for the organization. And that obviously contributes to overwhelm as well. Another feature may be chaos, lack of organizational clarity, especially lack of clarity in terms of like the next 90 days or the next 120 days. I was speaking to the CTO, a co-founder of a travel tech company, and he talked to me about crisis as usual as opposed to business as usual. I mean, it was funny, but at the same time, it's not funny because I know that it's a reality for many founders. And then that can replicate into higher levels of silos, more higher levels of rotation because people are leaving, which has a whole knock-on impact, which eventually trickles down to bottom line, which eventually trickles down to how much investment you're able to raise, how much bandwidth you have to be focusing on the most important things, and ultimately your revenue, your growth, your valuation, etc. So those are some of the kind of symptoms that you might see. But what's the other side of the equation? What's the opportunity? Oops, what's the opportunity on the other side of this equation? Well, the opportunity is about being able to achieve results through the development of other people. So you liberate yourself as a founder or as a set of leaders, and you maximize the capacity of people around you so that they're more energized, they're more motivated, they're doing work that they are good at and are capable of doing, and you're helping them to gain mastery and to grow and to improve. And so that you yourself are not so much in execution. So basically the big transition here, the big idea behind today's session is how do I go from doing to enabling. And that is a massive shift in an organization. And it's a key moment in terms of its transition towards having a scalable structure and process in place. Does that make sense? And within the transition from doing to enabling, I think there's a key word inside of here. I may not have mentioned it, but I'll say it now. And that key word is ownership, right? You as founders and investors naturally have the mindset and the disposition towards taking ownership of problems, of opportunities, of challenges, of relationships, situations in general. It probably doesn't even occur to you that you have an owner's mindset. You probably don't even know that that's how you think. You might do, but you may not. It may just be something you take for granted. But the idea is we want to cultivate that thinking of ownership across more people in the organization, because that's going to liberate you so that you can depend upon others to achieve results at scale. So that's really what the big idea is behind this conversation. So in summary, what is the definition of scalable leadership? Well, the definition is very simple. It's about how do I achieve business results through the development of myself and through the development of others. And a lot of times, the development of self and others is not a top priority. And that's understandable, especially in the early stages. But at some point, that lack of focus on self-development, lack of focus on development of others can really start to have a very significant impact on organizational performance. McKinsey did a study looking at organizational health, which is essentially about the same topic. And they concluded that organizations that invest in organizational health, in self-development, development of others, have 18% higher EBITDA after 18 months than organizations that don't. So there's some empirical data there to support the idea that focusing on these things is of financial relevance. So I wanted to open this up to a discussion via breakout. Priti's going to set that up for us. And the question is really very simple. Is like, what do you perceive maybe gets in the way of people taking higher levels of ownership within the organization? What are the kinds of blockers that you think prevent people from taking ownership? And then the second question, maybe a little bit more tricky, is how might leaders, how might you and I unknowingly be contributing to that lack of ownership? Does that make sense? So what are some of the things that you think block people from taking ownership? And maybe what are some of the ways that I'm operating or that we're operating as a leadership team that maybe is actually, without meaning to, contributing to that lack of ownership? So we'll just have 5 minutes for that as a breakout, then we'll share together as a group. Priti's going to set that up. Before we jump in, does anyone have any questions about the topic of the breakout? If we're all good, then Priti's going to set that up now, and I'll see you all in 5 minutes. I'll give you a 1-minute notification when it's almost time to come back. See you all shortly. Seems like Bhupinder has not been moved into a breakout yet.
Yeah, I'm just going to move some people around.
Okay, I'm going to grab a glass of water and let you figure that out. Be back in a moment. You might need to manually move Bhupinder
Yeah.
if she's... Okay, great.
I did it.
Well, everybody came back, so that's a good sign. Nobody quit. It's great to have you back. So what were some of your discussions? What were some of your insights? What did you discover about what do you think blocks people from having more ownership, and in what ways might we as leaders unknowingly contribute to that? Love to hear your thoughts on it.
Okay, I can start, Nash. In our group, what we discussed, we find that some of the blockers are fear of failure. So people, they don't like to take ownership because they feel they are in an environment that if they fail, this will not be well accepted or handled. The other thing is lack of clarity. When you don't have clear processes or responsibilities aligned, people, they tend not to take ownership because they don't know exactly if they are supposed to do that or not. And also when you have a too strong or a founder that controls everything, so it's hard for people to go against it and to take ownership of some parts of the job because they are fearing that this founder or this leader will be micromanaging and controlling every step of the way. So these were the three things that arose in our group.
Excellent. Very, very useful. And we're going to dive deeper into one of those three things. So thank you so much, Cynthia, for sharing that. Who else? What else did you see?
We have the exact same items from our group. Chris mentioned changing priorities, Eugenia, fear of failure. Juan said lack of clear communication of goals. My item same as Juan. Exact same things.
Excellent. Excellent. That's great. Anyone else? Okay, wonderful. So I was going to share a really short story with you about working with a founder of a tech scale up here in Barcelona. Travel tech company, 85 people. And I was coaching the founder and working with the leadership team for quite some years. And I remember one thing very clearly. The founder's day always began with coffee and KPIs. So he would go to a coffee shop just below his office, open his laptop, look at the dashboard with his coffee, sometimes two coffees, and he would look at the KPIs. And I would often meet him at that time of the day, and I could tell how good the company was doing just by looking at his face. Like he wore the company's results on his face, in his body, in his mind on a day-to-day basis. And he would talk to me about different aspects of the company that was frustrating for him. For example, he would talk about meetings, and he would talk about how in meetings, people were energized, they were contributing. It's not like people were sitting back quietly, they were contributing. But he felt that a lot of times people lacked context and they weren't optimizing for exactly the right things. And so they were arguing for things that kind of made sense, but then if you understood the bigger picture, it wouldn't make sense. So he would find that frustrating. He also talked about how deadlines would just kind of come and go and nobody would say anything about it, that they would just shift. And another thing he said was that he found it particularly annoying that there was always a good external reason as to why some things could not be done. And by external reason, I mean a reason that's outside of our control. Like, I don't know, the supplier didn't provide the code in time or whatever, or something that the technology failed, or someone outside of ourselves didn't do something, and therefore we didn't achieve what we were supposed to achieve. And so he would find this very annoying and frustrating. And he would also try to delegate more. So he'd heard the mantra that, oh, as a leader, you need to delegate more, delegate more, delegate more. He's like, yeah, I'm trying. But often he would find that the amount of time he had to invest in explaining something to somebody was so much that it didn't make sense for them to do it. It's just, might as well just do it myself if it's going to take me that long. And the other thing you would find is that people would sometimes they would do it and they would try to do it well. It's not like they had bad intention, they had good intention. But that as soon as they hit a roadblock, as soon as they hit a challenge, as soon as they hit a hurdle, guess what would happen? They would come running back and say, hey, how do I do this? How do I do that? I wasn't able to achieve this because I got stuck or whatever. So they were owning tasks, but they weren't really owning outcomes. And so this was producing a lot of the symptoms that I described on that earlier slide about overwhelm for him, because everything was kind of falling back upon him. He had to make a lot of decisions. He had to be the holder of the kind of the truth, as it were, in the meetings and in conversations. And he had to make sure that if something was important, even if somebody else was doing it, he would still have to take note of it to ensure that it was going to be done. So all of these things were resulting in more bottleneck upon him, more frustration, slowdown of performance, etc. And over the course of time, we worked through the scalable leadership model. I'll present it briefly to you now, and then, well, in a few moments, and then we'll dive deeper into one of the aspects of that. But we worked on that scalability aspect of his leader. How could he become more scalable as a leader? How could he tap into the potential of others to achieve results at scale? And the good news was it took a while, but one of the key KPIs that we measured as a success criteria for our work together was revenue per employee, right? Because that's something that's very directly translated to bottom line. So what we measured was that when we started working together, the revenue per employee was 76,000. And by the time we finished working together, it was 210,000. And he attributed about 60% of that change to the work that we've been doing together. And so I'm just sharing that with you to give you an idea that, like, it's not like you make one change in this dimension and suddenly you have a revenue result or benefit. But if you do the right things consistently over a period of time, it definitely has a very tangible effect on the bottom line. And by the way, I think he estimated that change in revenue per employee was worth something like 11 million euros in annual revenue for a company. So I just wanted to share that with you to just show how kind of tangible the results can be when the right things are occurring. So with that said, I'm going to share with you a framework, Scalable Leadership. I don't expect you to take this all in. We're just going to go into one aspect of that so that we'll have something practical for you to come out of today with, to be able to practice and implement in your team. Of course, it's too big to try and cover all of it, but we're just going to dive into one aspect of it. But I just thought I would share that overall framework with you first. So you can see that on the left-hand side here, you remember I said the definition of scalable leadership is about development of self and the development of others. So the left-hand side of this is all about, how do I as a leader become more scalable? What are the fundamental qualities that I need as a leader to be able to achieve more with less? And I believe those qualities are basically balance, fundamentally balance. This is the most important precondition. If I'm not balanced within my mind, within my emotion, within my state of being, if I'm all over the place, if I'm upset one day, excited the next day, angry the next, if I'm all over the place and I'm reactive to situations, then fundamentally I need to work on balance, because I need to be able to navigate those situations from a place of ease. And that gives rise to the second point, which is around insight and clarity. Do I have clear thinking? Am I able to see through the noise and to have clarity? That's a very, very important quality of a leader, I believe. And then clarity applied to now, what's the situation, but also clarity applied to the future, which is about vision. And then ultimately the ability to influence and bring other people along on that journey so that they understand, they feel motivated, and they're engaged in that journey too. So a big part of scalable leadership is about the self dimension, excuse me. And then on the team dimension, it's broken down into two parts. There's a 4-step process for leading an individual through the life cycle of having an employee. So like, what are the 4 steps of leading one-to-one? And then the second thing, which is very similar to the first, is how do I lead groups? How do I lead teams? And we're going to jump into the first step of that process just now. So, I'm sorry to come back, but the steps are one dimension of it, and underneath that is a set of skills that allows you to then really cultivate and implement those steps in a much more sustainable and widespread kind of a way. Okay. I know I probably said a lot of things. Let me just kind of narrow it down a little bit now and say, okay, so within those 4 steps of leading a team, here are those 4 steps. The same thing that I just mentioned: co-create success picture, align on gaps, and where are we now, right? Sorry, just give me a second. So those are the 4 elements of it. So let's get into a little bit more about the question of co-creating a success picture. What does that mean? What is a success picture? Right? So a success picture is it's a vision of a future scenario. It's something that determines in a very clear and measurable way, where are we trying to go? It's something that depicts in a very measurable fashion what it is that we're trying to achieve. Okay. So what makes a success picture clear and measurable, as I mentioned, is focusing on measurable outcomes as opposed to just focusing on activities or tasks, right? So a measurable outcome might be, well, let's take an example, which is this very meeting right here. So what were my measurable outcomes for defining success in this session? My measurable outcomes is that this session produces a highly positive feedback in terms of how relevant people found the content to their day-to-day. And so I'm going to ask you to do a very short survey at the end of this. And one of the questions in that survey is, how relevant did you find this content to your day-to-day? So one of my success measures for today is that we achieve a score of 4 and 5 or above on how relevant this session is for your day-to-day. Because if it's not relevant, then that's not success for me. Does that make sense? And the second success criteria that I have is I'm offering free leadership advisory coaching to a small number of people, so that I have X number of people who put their hand up and say, hey, actually, I could see this would be useful for me. So those are two measurable indicators that I could use that would tell me whether this session has been successful or not. Okay? So, sorry, bear with me a sec. So those are two of the main ingredients. So now, when is it useful to do this, to co-create a success picture? Well, fundamentally, it's useful whenever two people or two or more people are working together towards a common goal, right? Which is obviously a lot of the time, right? What are some examples? Well, let's say you're having a one-to-one with your team member. You're working together with them. How clear is success, and how co-owned is success between the two of you for the particular meeting you're having, or maybe for the next 3 months? What does success look like in our relate? Imagine I was doing a one-to-one with Urs. I might say to him, hey, what does success look like in our conversation today? Or I might say, what would success look like in 3 months? If we're successful in 3 months, how would we know? What would be the measures of that? A lot of times we don't do that. We just focus on, okay, we're having a one-to-one. What's going on for you? What's going on for me? What are your challenges? Whatever. But we're just straight into the doing, but we haven't actually articulated what success would look like. So we don't really know if we're actually moving in the right direction or not. You could also apply this to setting goals, or let's say you're trying to improve a process, an internal process. You might just jump straight into doing the work, or you might pause and ask, how would we know that we've been, what would success look like? So these are some different type of scenarios. I'm just trying to paint the picture that whenever you're working with somebody else, there is invariably going to be an opportunity for you to pause before you jump into action and consider, hey, what would success look like for us in this conversation, in this meeting, in this process, etc. So I want you to get the sense that this is something that could be used in a very wide number of scenarios. So what are some of the core attributes of a strong success picture? Well, it should be clear and unambiguous, right? So it goes back to the point about outcomes. So if the success is clear and measurable, then that's great. It should be time bound, because if it doesn't have a date, then we're not really being specific. It could just happen at any time. So it needs to be time bound. Ideally, if we're doing something, whether it's a one-to-one, whether it's a goal, whether it's whatever, it should be clear to people, why does this matter? And how does this fit in with the bigger picture of what we're trying to do? Right? So it's kind of like zooming out of the task and asking ourselves, okay, so not only we're saying, what should success look like, but we're also kind of saying, why does it matter? Why is that important? Because fundamentally, like, who here likes to bake a cake that nobody's going to eat? Nobody likes to do that. Nobody's going to write a book for the sake of nobody reading it. People like to do stuff that matters. That's just a fundamentally human attribute, isn't it? And so a lot of times we don't necessarily take the time to ask ourselves those questions and make the connection and make it explicit. In your mind, it might be clear, but is it clear for the other? And then shared, is it co-created? Do people feel a high sense of ownership around that? Okay. Don't worry, I'll be sharing the slides with you. If you want to revisit all of this, you have the recording, the slides, everything is going to be available. Okay, so clear, time-bound, purposeful, and shared. I'll share another very short story with you, and then we'll jump into more of a technique that you can then test and develop for yourself. Okay, this story is, I was working with it was actually a scale-up social enterprise based in Madrid, team of about 45 people. And the head of sales was working on a very large proposal. The client was Coca-Cola, and the proposal was worth millions. And they were supposed to work in conjunction with the marketing team, what they call the growth team. And growth was supposed to produce a video that was going to be embedded within their proposal to highlight the strength of their proposal compared to their competitors. And 48 hours before the proposal was due to be sent out, she received, the CSO, she received the file with the video from growth. And when she opened it, she described to me that her heart sank. In other words, she had the feeling that this was not going to work, that it was not conveying the right message. She thought it was very professional, it looked great, but fundamentally there was key elements of the value proposition of the company that were not portrayed in the video. For example, she wanted to portray that their company was very strong in really supporting the client through the end-to-end journey, and that wasn't part of the it wasn't part of the video. There were other things that she was unhappy about it. So basically what ended up happening is she ended up spending the weekend. She reworked the whole thing. She was working all of the hours under the sun. She reworked the video and then sent it out and eventually won the proposal. And in the debrief with the growth team, what do you think was the main takeaway from their conversation? Well, the main takeaway from the conversation was that they hadn't adequately invested in co-creating the success picture at a detailed enough level. They knew that the video needed to be this many minutes, that it needed to be embedded within this proposal, but they didn't understand what were some of the core success elements that were needed in order for that video to really meet the mark. And so they were driven by speed and efficiency, but they weren't really stopping to really consider, is what we're going to produce fit for purpose? So that was the key takeaway that she got, and that those teams working together through the debrief, through the retro, that's what they learned. So I've been talking to you about the co-creation of a success picture, and now I would love to share with you a technique, so to speak, that you can use, a skill that you can cultivate in order to, so to speak, build the muscle so that you can get better and better at co-creating success picture over the course of time. Okay? And I hope you're ready for something extremely, extremely simple. It's just 4 words, but do not mistake the simplicity for ease. Just because something is simple, it doesn't necessarily mean it's easy. You ready for it? Here it comes. Drum roll, please. Tell less, ask more. 4 simple words. 4 simple words that could have an immense, measurable, positive impact on, number 1, the clarity of success pictures, how well defined the success picture is, the level of ownership and engagement people have over that success picture, and C, the level of speed and traction and ownership that they have when it comes to execution. So what does it mean to tell less, ask more? Well, if you're like me, when I have something clear in my mind, my tendency is to tell more and ask less, right? Because we already know. But if you already know, and you assume that other people know, then you're in the doing mode, not in the enabling mode. So if you slow down and you take a pause and you lead with the right relevant questions that help to arrive at a clear success picture, then I believe you start to increase ownership and pave the way for scalability. So let's look at that in a bit more of a practical dimension. By the way, does anyone have any questions at this point? I'd love to just pause, take a moment. What's making sense for you? Do you have any questions? Let's take a moment just to give people the opportunity to say anything that they would like to say at this point.
Nash, may I just make a comment on this? I find it very interesting because this tell less and ask more. This is something that we usually tell to founders when they are selling. So like, don't just sell, don't just pitch a solution, but also ask and try to understand how your client is solving their problems. And it's also something that we usually tell founders when they are fundraising, like, don't just pitch your company, but try to understand the reality of your investor, what kind of startups they invest in. So try to have an awareness or to build some knowledge on the environment before telling what you want to tell. So I find it very interesting because it really resonates with other advices that we give to founders, but it also applies to their teams in the end. So just a comment that I like it very much.
Yeah, I hear that very much. And it's just as relevant to those stakeholders and those scenarios. But often we might miss the opportunity to do that with our teams, probably because we're just trying to be fast and efficient.
Yeah, or we believe that they all know everything that we know, so we don't need to invest time and ask about their perspectives, you know. And
Precisely. Thanks for the comment. Any other questions, reflections, comments, anything at all? Okay. So we're going to do another breakout. And in this second breakout, I'm going to paint a very specific scenario for you. Okay? And the scenario is the following. I'll leave you a moment to read it, actually, so that you can absorb it yourself. Okay? So let's just go through that together. So it doesn't matter if you are actually a founder or an investor. The scenario could be applicable in either case. Okay? So you're meeting with either a founder or a portfolio company or a team member that you work with. Okay? And you understand that the reason why you're meeting is to kick off a new initiative. Now you decide what the new initiative is. Let's say it's, I don't know, you want to improve an internal process or you want to launch a new product. It doesn't really matter, honestly. The questions that you're going to be asking, the topic of conversation doesn't really depend on the specific, because we're not getting into the content of like the new product or whatever, right? It's just the context. So the context is you're trying to kick off, let's say you're trying to improve a process and you're working with somebody else on it. Now, as the person proposing the meeting, you have it clear in your mind what success should look like in that new process, for example, or in that new product or whatever it is that you're doing together. Okay. So the breakout is to do two things. Number one is I want you to take a very short period of time, but maybe the first 30 seconds or the first minute, and consider what would be your normal course of action in this scenario. When you have something clear, you're meeting to do something, you've got a clear objective, what would you normally do? Okay, forget the ask more, tell less for a second. What would be your normal response? And just do that very short. Don't take too much time on that, because the big part of the activity is to consider. The second part is now taking into consideration ask more and tell less. What specific questions could you ask within the context of this group or this individual that you're working with? What specific questions could you ask to uncover and co-create a success picture together before you tell them what you have in your mind? Does that make sense? So part one is like, what would you normally do? What would be your default response when you already see the outcome clearly in your mind? Okay, that's just quick, but the main part of the conversation, it should say number two, by the way. The main part of the conversation is, what specific questions. So when you come back, I'm going to ask you, what specific questions did you come up with that you think could be helpful to uncover a success picture when I'm working with others? Okay. We're doing reasonably well on time, so you could have 8 minutes for that breakout. Okay. So Prithi's going to set that up, and when you come back, we'll have a discussion about those specific questions. Any questions on the breakout before we jump in? Everyone's clear? Great. See you in 8 minutes. Hi, and welcome back. So this is the part where I listen and then you guys share. I'm curious to know, how was the experience before we jump into the specific question? Was it easy for you? Was it challenging for you? How was it to come up with those questions?
Was brainstorming.
Forced brainstorming, did you say?
Yeah.
So does that imply that it was a little bit challenging?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. Yes.
Yes, it is.
What made it challenging?
Not challenging actually, yeah, but yes.
Well, I think you asked for what specific questions, and you can formulate, you can put these questions if you know the dilemma, or what's the issue, and therefore there's not an issue there, or there's not a topic which is actually specified. So in our group we focus more on the way to proceed, so not the specific questions.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, I'm curious to hear from anyone, or you or anyone in the group, what kind of ways to proceed did you explore together?
We discussed about well, if you have an idea, and let's put it, I mean, there is an initiative that you see, well, as leader, or someone who has influence, investor, or let's say CEO, that instead of saying your initiative, that you you make the necessary questions that will, of course, I mean, not with the aim of getting exactly to your goal or exactly to your idea, but to let's say, to be able, during the process of questions and discussion, to either reinforce your idea or question your idea. Okay, so I mean, this can enrich the process, and can enrich even your initiative, your idea, your, let's say, thinking that way. And I think Bhupinder said also to open the question. I don't know, maybe you can explain clear, with the pros and cons. Bhupinder, you can maybe explain what you told us.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I just added on to this that if we talk about specific questions that need to be asked the team, is that how the team sees this new initiative, what are the positives that team see that we will be achieving by implementing this new initiative? Will this initiative make their lives easy? Will it increase the efficiency or speed in a particular task that they are doing, or it increases the revenue potential? So the positive sides and the cons, if they see any particular challenge or the con side of the initiative. So to have an open feedback on that. new initiative to create and agree on to the chat. So that's my.
Those are wonderful questions. And I wonder, just you answer anyone who wants, but what value do you see in those questions? What benefit could come from having that dialogue?
Sorry, come again, I couldn't get you.
I was asking, what benefit do you think can come from asking those questions? What's the value of having that dialogue with people?
Yeah, so that is to bring everybody on the same page, basically, that we discuss it, and to increase, as we were saying, that if we proceed further, so we have listened to everyone and taken their feedback in, and yeah, so the ownership comes if it's discussed and agreed.
And could I ask as well, again, this is a question to anyone, what did you answer for the first question? Like, what would you normally do if you weren't practicing ask more, tell less? What would be the normal tendency in that scenario?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, of course. I'm saying, let's forget this ask more, tell less for a moment. You're meeting with somebody else to design a new process, right? And you in your mind, you already have kind of clear what you think it should be. So if you were not practicing ask more, tell less, what would you normally do?
Well, you would probably, if you're lucky, you'll repeat the problem set, but often we even skip that and we define very detailed the solution that we thought. Which is not letting much room for other ideas unless someone is very strong and challenges, so it closes doors. The normal scenario is you just impose your solution on people. There's no buy-in, there's no ownership, and a lot of misunderstanding potentially.
Yeah. And how do you think that lack of ownership in the normal way of doing it then impacts in execution? What is the trickle-down effect? What is the knock-on effect of that when it comes to execution?
Well, as your introduction was, lack of ownership, right? People don't own the overall thing. They might own steps that you assigned or that whatever that they've assigned to themselves. But as soon as there's something on the way, they'll stop and they'll turn back to, in that case, the leader for what to do, rather than owning, they haven't understood the objective, the trajectory, why we're doing that, how we're doing that, and actually owning up to it by contributing to it. I think in the first point, they don't co-own, so they don't co-create, so they don't co-solve. Yeah, and I think we discussed we all had understood something different, which was quite interesting. One was to invite others to, having stated the problem, to invite others to come up with their solution or their thoughts before sharing yours. And then one of us had more an approach of doing that, but doing that in a way to try to lead them to our idea. And then last was to share the idea and explicitly ask for them to, that's what was just said before, to ask them explicitly to say what they thought was good or bad or how it will turn out, so that through that discussion they might agree or we change it or own it up more because they've understand the thought process by opening it, but the solution would be fixed. So I think there's 3 ways to engage with the team, so that at the end, hopefully, we all own whatever solution remains as a co-created solution. That's how I got it.
Excellent. It connects very much to what Juan was also saying about the value of you may hear new things come up in the conversation that you hadn't considered. So you may actually end up with a richer success. I mean, isn't that really the essence of the value of teamwork? that 1 + 1 + 1 could equal 50 or 5 or 10? Isn't that the point of teamwork? Is that we think together and that we build upon each other's collective insight and wisdom, as opposed to just saying, okay, otherwise 3 people could just work on their own and put their ideas together at the end and yes, that. That's not as valuable. So you're absolutely right. One of the possible benefits that can arise from this approach is that you come up with a success picture that's better than what you had already in mind. That's richer, that's more complete, that takes into consideration more perspectives. So that's one benefit. And then the other benefit, as you talked about already, I'm just recapping what you already said, was that you foster that co-ownership. That I don't know the person who was speaking just before, but the gentleman who was just speaking right now was talking about co-ownership, right? And if we connect this back to the first breakout, in the first breakout, I asked you, what are some of the things that block ownership? And you guys said fear of failure, lack of clarity, and a controlling founder. So I was connecting it specifically back to lack of clarity. What is something that blocks ownership? Lack of clarity. How do you overcome that? Well, you invest in the dialogue to co-create what success really looks like. So you overcome the lack of clarity so that people leave with, I wouldn't say absolute clarity, because that's very hard to achieve, and it's an imperfect world. We're never necessarily going to get to this perfect clarity. That's okay. It's not about perfection. It's about how close to alignment and clarity do we get? And how much is it worth investing in the dialogue to get there? And obviously then that has knock-on effects in terms of the level of enjoyment and engagement in the conversation, the level of ownership that people have, and also how many questions you end up having to field later on when if people don't really own the success picture, then they're more likely to come back to you and say, okay, I did this, now what do I do next? Or I tried this and I had a problem, they didn't answer, the supplier didn't respond, so what do? I don't know, I'm stuck. Whereas if they take ownership over the outcome, they're like, oh, I clearly see what we're trying to achieve here. I see why. In fact, Bhupinder also asked questions. I can't remember exactly which question it was, but one of the questions you asked was about, why does it matter? Right? What's the value of?
Yeah, what's the value addition they see with this new initiative, what it solves?
What it solves, who does it help? Does it help us to have an easier process? Does it improve the customer's experience? What's the value of it? I know this stuff is so simple, guys, so simple. And that's often the things that we maybe neglect. And so I think those are really sound and great insights. So did anyone have any specific questions that you think could be useful to help uncover and co-create a success picture? Any specific questions you might ask to come to that co-created success picture?
In my group, Tiago mentioned why this is important for you personally. So he would ask this question. I don't know if I already mentioned, I was gone for a bit, but I find it really important and useful.
What's in it for you?
Mm-hmm.
What's in it for the person, right?
For each person involved there also.
Exactly. Excellent. Any other questions? Would it be helpful if I shared a few examples of questions that you might want to use? Of course, it's not a blueprint, but just some sample questions that you might want to use. Would that be helpful? Okay, well, here are some possible questions you could use. Very simple and straightforward. What does success look like for you in this project? Instead of leading with your idea. Often if you put your idea on the table and then you ask people to evaluate it, they're evaluating within the context of what you've already put on the table. You've already influenced their thinking. So instead of that, you could lead with asking more instead of telling more, and say, hey, what does success look like for you in this project? And maybe what they say is completely irrelevant, but at least you surface it, and then you have the opportunity to correct it. But if you don't ask, you don't know. So what might success look like for you in this project? Another question you could ask could be something like, imagine you could ask this question, imagine we were 3 months down the track and now we were looking back. What would need to have happened in order for us to know that we've been successful? And then people are like, oh, yeah, okay. What we would have needed is, let's say we were improving an internal process and we asked this question, say, what would we have needed to know that we've been successful? Well, we might say that customers are able to pass from point A to point B in 20% less time. That's an outcome, it's measurable. Or that we have a higher conversion rate, or that more people are following the process. Those are outcomes. How will we know along the way if we're moving in the right direction? There's another possible question you could ask, like, what are some of the signs that you might observe? Another one is, what is one key measure of success? It's kind of similar to the second question. Another is, what are we hoping this will unlock for the team? This is exactly the question that Ella and Bhupinder kind of already mentioned. And what would be the negative impact of underachievement? So if we didn't do a good job of this, what kind of negative implication might that have? And then at the end, and I wanted to say this because Juan also mentioned this indirectly, is that it doesn't mean that you don't get to share your perspective as a founder, as a leader, as somebody who knows or has a vision. It doesn't mean that you don't share your perspective, you only ask questions. No, you ask questions, you surface ideas, you enrich your possible thinking, and then you share your observations about what people have said, or maybe you need to add some things, maybe they don't have all the context, maybe there's something else, so you have the opportunity to add to the thinking as well. I really love this quote. It says, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. So what we need to do is we need to invest in the right kind of communication to ensure that really genuinely, because we talk about alignment all the time, but how much effort are we making to ensure that that alignment is there, to ensure that that ownership is there? So I wanted to kind of, I know we're coming towards the end. I wanted to leave a few minutes for Q&A. I wanted to also propose to you a small challenge. And the challenge is the following. Think of a meeting or a conversation coming up in the next week where co-creation of a success picture will be useful. Okay, I'll give you just 30 seconds to do that now. Just think of a meeting in the next week where you think it could be useful to co-create a success picture. Write it down. You don't have to share it. You can if you like. Just take a moment and think of that. Okay, has everyone got something? Thumbs up if you got something. There's only a few people on with their video on, so hard to tell. Okay, so hopefully you have a scenario. The second thing is pretty obvious. How will you ask more and tell less to come up with a co-created success picture? What questions might you ask? I just gave you some examples. You came up with some examples. So you could refer back to the slides. You could refer back to this conversation. What specific questions might you ask in preparation so that you go in there prepared to co-create a success picture with your team? And then lastly, after you've done this, maybe you could share with Ella, maybe you could share with me on LinkedIn or my email address. What was your experience of that? Was it beneficial? Was it easy? What value did you get for it? Or did you have any challenges along the way? Okay, so this is my challenge for you, is choose a scenario, think of the questions you want to ask, and then share your experience with either myself, Ella, or whoever else, a colleague, after, to see whether this is something that you think could be helpful for you in your leadership.